PackPride. And Cory, great to have you on again as we preview Syracuse NC State. How are you today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing well. Appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, so I guess first and foremost, let's start with Grayson McCall. Obviously, a scary incident, scary scene during that Wake Forest game. Taken to the hospital, released from the hospital. Dave Doran had said earlier in the week that he's not out for the rest of the season, that they expect him back at some point. What is the latest on Grayson McCall's condition, and when do you expect to see him back on the field again?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, after what we saw on Saturday, and given the fact that he suffered a concussion earlier in the season as well, and this one put him in concussion protocol again. I mean, if he returns, I'd be surprised. To be quite honest with you, I mean, Dave Doran's already been talking this week about the fact that he's going to make a great coach in the future. He's said things along the lines of, hey, we're going to go through all the proper protocols. We're going to talk to his parents. We're going to talk to the player and the medical team and all this different stuff. And, before we make a decision, but, 6 games remaining in the season and potentially a bowl game if they get there, we'll see. I don't know that I'd put Grayson McCall back out there. This is his third concussion he's suffered in the last 12 months. And the last one, the first one of that obviously left him out of the entire rest of the season last year at Coastal with 6 games remaining. So I think it's the C.J. Bailey show moving forward. You hope that C.J. Bailey stays healthy because the only guy you got behind him is another redshirt freshman and Lex Thomas that you didn't quite expect to have to play this season.
All right, so let's talk about C.J. Bailey then. And, he's gotten a lot of time, as you mentioned, that McCall's been injured and dealing with a couple of different concussions. And so we've seen a lot of C.J. Bailey. What do you make of him and his skill set? And, it doesn't look like he's much of a threat to run, right? I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, he actually can run a little bit. He's more of a pocket passer, but he more runs to scramble and keep plays alive than he does to really – run, or, he kind of uses that in the RPO a little bit sometimes where, they will have some design runs for him. But, what I mentioned earlier is I think a reason why they probably won't run him a ton, and that's because of the fact that you don't have a lot behind him. So, 6 games left, you don't want to put, him at risk. But what we've seen from him so far is everything we saw from him at the high school level. He's a 6'6" quarterback. He's wiry. He's a little over 200 pounds. I think they list him at 210, 215, something along those lines. So he's not a big body quarterback, but, at 6'6", he's able to see over the line of scrimmage, goes, through his progressions really well. Like I said, he's able to, kind of scramble to open plays up and keep plays alive. We saw it this past weekend against Wake Forest. He scrambles out to the left and gets a spot open for Keenan Jackson for his first touchdown. So you've seen that ability from him. And I think the biggest thing for him is kind of keeping that, cool, calm, collected, demeanor to him despite being a true freshman. We saw that at Clemson. Yes, it was a blowout loss for them, but it wasn't mostly on the offensive side of the football. They weren't really able to get going early on because Clemson's defense was so tough to get through. But, they were able to move the football a little bit, and, his passing numbers looked really good in that game despite the fact that, the result wasn't great for them.
You look at his weapons, and right now his tight end, Justin Jolly, leading the team in receiving yards. We all remember Kevin Concepcion from last year, had over 1,100 total yards of offense, had a fantastic freshman season. What can you tell us about him? He's second on the team in receiving yards, first on the team in total receptions, only averaging about 7 yards per reception. How's his season been going, and what do you see as the ceiling for him as a player?
Yeah, you mentioned Justin Jolie. Obviously, the fact that he comes in, he's a big body tight end, a guy that they feel like has a chance to, he's obviously their leading receiver right now at this point, but somebody that makes those contested catches and, breaks tackle, something that they didn't have a ton of last season. And then, like you said, KC, last year, the rookie of the year, freshman of the year, whichever one you want to call it, he was an elite talent last year for them. He hasn't been able to really get going this year, and a lot of that is because, partially because of the fact that, they just haven't really been able to get the ball to him in creative ways and get him, scheme him open. It's more of trying to go with screen passes. In the last 2 weeks, weirdly enough, he's been in negative receiving yardage the last 2 weeks in each of the two first halves. because of the fact that, like I said, they're trying these pop passes, they're trying screen passes to him, and really the offense is not allowing him enough room to be able to work and get through those holes or get around the edges and things along those lines. So I'm interested to see how they use him this week, because it's pretty clear that those things aren't working. It's just whether or not the offensive coordinator, Robert and I, who formerly Syracuse offensive coordinator, did some pretty creative things there in his 1 year, whether or not he sees that, and hopefully they start trying to get the ball to him, at least in short to intermediate routes, as opposed to trying to swing it out there to him and getting some guys deep open down the field as well.
You mentioned Robert and I. Has that been a storyline at all this week, given his familiarity with this team and this program, or because it's a new coaching staff here, does that not really play into this week? I mean, some of the personnel obviously is still here, but obviously a new coaching staff.
Yeah, it is a little bit. We haven't actually talked to Robert and I this week. We haven't spoken to him in quite a few weeks, just because they've said, hey, we're focused on trying to fix this team, and they don't want to talk to the media. So that's great. But, Robert and I think the part of the story is the fact that, obviously what he did there in 1 year, at least for the first 6 games, and particularly against NC State in that one game on the road, those are great accomplishments. But like you said, this is a new coaching staff. This is, Robert and I has been gone for 2 years now at this point, and Syracuse did what they did last year. It's a completely different regime now at this point. So, I think there is a little bit of, you never want to lose to your old team. But, at the same time, you have a guy like that. And then, also in Syracuse, Jahad Carter being another guy that, came over to NC State previously at Syracuse. He's struggled mightily this year, particularly in coverage. So I'm interested to see how much they use him, if at all, because Tamarcus Cooley has kind of taken his spot over. So, the two guys that came over from Syracuse, both kind of seen as, embattled parts of this team right now. But I think one has a chance to really kind of dig himself out of a hole this week if they can get a little more creative on offense. You
look at this team, and 3-3. They came into the year ranked. I don't need to tell you that, but for our listeners, they were ranked in the top 25 to start the year. They lost to two really good teams, right? Clemson and Tennessee, both really good. The head scratcher was a little bit that Wake Forest game, but they lose Grayson McCall in the middle of that one, and they just end up coming up short in the end. What is it like down there right now? The team obviously not living up to expectations, but do they feel like this game could kind of be a turning point to their season? Because you look at their schedule after this, and Cal, Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, no easy games there, but certainly winnable games down the stretch. Do they look at this as maybe like a chance to save their season, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think a little bit, but, I think all the games the rest of the way are seen as, potential turning points, or, they're all seen as winnable games, but also very losable games. Sure. Because as you mentioned, Syracuse, they're the antithesis of what NC State has done so far this season. They are the team that has, been able to, kind of outdo the expectations preseason, outside of obviously the frustrating Stanford loss, but, beating two teams that were in the top 25 of the team, whether you believe they should have been or not. They were good quality teams leading up to those points, and they're 4-1. For NC State, if you're able to find a way to win this game at home, kind of wipe away the slate of what just happened last week, because the Wake Forest game was viewed as the most winnable game in the ACC for them. Now, obviously, we know Grayson McCall gets the injury that leads to a turnover that leads to an easy touchdown for Wake Forest, and it changes the momentum of that game. But this is a chance for NC State to, like you said, get back on track. If they can get back above 500 before you go to Cal, which is also another team that, despite being 0-2 in the ACC, has definitely done a whole lot better than people thought that, preseason expectations for them. And they have some explosive playmakers as well. That's going to be another tough game before they get to their first bye 8 weeks into the season. So these next 2 weeks are seen as a chance to, potentially turn things around with a win in either one of the games, if not both. But if you lose both and you fall 2 games below 500, that's probably seen as a breaking point for the season going into the bye week.
There are a lot of tough places to play in the ACC. NC State's been very good at home, 25-5 in the last 5 years. Do you feel like Carter Finley gets the kind of recognition that maybe it deserves? I mean, what is it about that particular stadium, that venue, the fan base there, that makes it such a difficult place to go in and try and win a game?
Yeah, it's one of those. The great part about Carter Finley Stadium is the fact that the stands are really, really close. It's pretty tight, given the fact that, yes, there's plenty of sidelines and everything along those lines, but like there's a big barrier wall right there, about 10 feet in after the sidelines, and then the fans are right on top of you. So when you're on the sidelines, they're giving it to you, on the visiting sideline, and then they're loud. 55,000 doesn't seem like a ton, but man, the NC State fan base has always been rabid. They've sold out every game through the rest of the season, which makes 20 straight home games that they will sell out at this point. So, yes, there's some frustration going on, but the NC State fan base has always shown up and been loud. And I think that's what makes this such a difficult place to play. The fact that it's a primetime game, it's the first primetime game since the season opener at NC State, and then you have a blackout atmosphere, all this different stuff. So, yeah, you have to take all those things into account. You just hope that the quality of team for NC State shows up that you expected preseason, and at least makes it a manageable game in the first and second quarter, because if they get out of it early, that can really take the crowd out of it, and that's something that you don't want if you're an NC State team that desperately needs this win.
All right, you kind of touched on it right there, Cory, but my last question, just how do you see this game playing itself out come Saturday night at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this can be a tight game for NC State. They played every home game so far this season. They played tight. Now, granted, I'm not saying Syracuse is NIU or, they're Louisiana Tech, but they trailed in just about every single game in the first half, with the exception of the NIU game. So I do see Syracuse probably getting out to a pretty good start. That's what teams have been able to do against this defense. It's how NC State's offense is able to rebound in the second half, and it's the defense is able to hold. I'm probably going to end up going with Syracuse in this game. I do see it being somewhere around like a 31-28 type game. I think the NC State offense is able to get some good things going, but the defense has not shown the ability to be able to consistently stop playmakers, and guys like Aronde Gadsden, and obviously what we've seen from Kyle McCord in this offense. Aronde Gadsden, up until last week, his career high yardage and touchdowns came against NC State back in 2022 at 147 and 2 touchdowns. So, if you're looking for a playmaker in this one, that's probably going to be the guy. And if they can't shut him down, and they can't shut down the running back, they can't shut down the other wide receivers, it's going to be a long day for the NC State defense. So I just think there's going to be too much firepower for Syracuse. They find a way to win this one, like I said, probably around 31-28, 31-27, something along those lines.
All right, Cory, we appreciate the insight. Thanks so much for coming on. Enjoy the game, and hopefully we can talk to you again during basketball season.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, Cory Smith from PackPride. And with that, we will take a timeout. We're going to get to the match game.